Tonight, decision day in New Brunswick. A majority win for the Liberals.
New Brunswickers are ready for a change.
Denies the progressive Conservative leader a third term.
It's certainly not the night we'd hoped for.
While in BC, continuing delays after its dramatic election this weekend.
This is razor thin in terms of the margins here.
The mounting toll from BC's deadly atmospheric river.
It's devastating. I mean, it's like somebody died here.
Tonight's emergency meeting in the Commons on foreign interference.
It is a clear, dangerous, and unprecedented red line that has been crossed.
Plus, the global call from women's soccer players to FIFA, urging it to sever sponsorship ties with the Saudi oil giant over human rights. And an Indigenous leader's message to the King.
Give us what you stole from us! Our bones, our skulls, our babies!
Reaction to the heckle and the future of the monarchy.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. Voters in New Brunswick have handed the Liberals a decisive victory tonight and in the process made political history.
And we are going to work our butts off on day one. A new day and a brighter future is coming to New Brunswick tomorrow.
Susan Holt will now lead the province, taking over from Blaine Higgs, who also lost his own riding this evening.
So tonight's result, obviously, will start the process of leadership transition within PCNB. I will have discussion in the days ahead with my caucus, the party leadership, and my family about the next steps and how to proceed.
CTV's Sarah Plowman has been tracking the results. And Sarah, a political first in New Brunswick tonight.
Omar, a Liberal majority means that Premier-designate Susan Holt is set to become New Brunswick's first female Premier, and with that she pushes PC leader Blaine Higgs out. Now, Holt really won on a promise to prioritize health care. She's promising to open 30 collaborative care clinics. And speaking with voters over the last few days, health care was the top issue again and again. Holt was and has been the leader of the Liberal Party here in New Brunswick for the past 2 years. Before that, she was president of the New Brunswick Business Council. Before that, CEO of Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. PC leader Blaine Higgs not only lost the election tonight, but he also lost his seat. He had been Premier for the past 6 years, and in that time moved the party further to the right. He faced inner turmoil over a controversial pronoun policy in schools, and many of his PC MLAs chose not to run this election, but tonight Higgs said he still stands by that policy. Omar.
All right, Sarah Plowman on election night in New Brunswick. Sarah, thanks. And on the other side of the country, in British Columbia, voters are still waiting after Saturday's political nail-biter. And while it could be days before there's a final result, as CTV's Robert Buffin reports, there is clarity tonight on one outcome, that the province is deeply divided.
It was a wild election night in BC where the dust is still settling and there isn't a clear winner. But BC Conservatives claimed an historic number of seats.
This has been a night where we have seen the political landscape in British Columbia change forever.
2 days later, the results show the NDP have 46 MLAs elected or leading, 45 BC Conservatives, and 2 Greens, seemingly holding the balance of power needed to reach 47 seats, the minimum number needed for a majority government.
We're right in a hyper uncertain environment right now politically in this province.
2 races are so close, within 100 votes, a recount is needed. In Wanda Fuka-Malahat, the NDP candidate had a very thin margin of victory. And in Surrey City Centre, it was only 95 votes. There are also nearly 50,000 mail-in ballots that arrived after advance polls closed. It'll be up to a week before those and the 2 recounts are done. Despite Saturday night's cheers, David Eby was subdued. Premier for now, as long as the numbers hold.
We've got to do better. And that was our commitment to British Columbians. We've got to do better, and we will do better.
If the numbers don't change, he'll get first crack at forming a government, likely in the new year, after MLAs for all parties are sworn in, along with his cabinet in the next couple months. But he'll need the support of the BC Greens' 2 new MLAs. Power brokers, despite leader Sonia Furstenau losing her race. Retiring Green MLA Adam Olsen remained tight-lipped about potential deals.
This election isn't over yet. There are a handful of seats that are really, really close.
Meanwhile, John Rustad, buoyed by his party's performance, is defiant he'll topple an NDP attempt at government as soon as he can, and isn't ruling out cooperating with the Greens to form government.
There are some things that I think we can work together on, some things that we could make actually happen.
We have at least a week, maybe two, to know for certain who won this election, and even then, that winner will perch on a razor's edge to maintain power.
Robert Buffum, CTV News.
And staying in BC, a potent atmospheric river in the province has left at least 2 people dead and 1 more presumed dead. East of Vancouver, a 57-year-old died after her home was suddenly swept away in a massive mudslide over the weekend. On Vancouver Island, 1 person died and another is believed to have drowned after 2 vehicles were found submerged in a river. Heavy rain drenched BC's south coast, shattering records in 12 communities. And in a BC courtroom today, 2 men, Tanner Fox and Jose Lopez, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the killing of a former Air India bombing suspect. Rapudaman Singh Malik was acquitted in 2005 of the bombings that killed 331 people. In 2022, he was shot inside his vehicle. Singh was 75 years old. His family says it is, quote, grateful Fox and Lopez have been brought to justice, but urged them both to cooperate with police in, quote, bringing those that hired you to justice. To the emergency debate on Parliament Hill tonight on foreign interference, a week after the RCMP said it had evidence linking the Indian government to violent acts on Canadian soil. CTV's Mike LeCouture has more on the impact.
2 formal warnings.
Twice in the last 2 years, Moninder Singh has been warned by police he faced risk of assassination. The spokesperson for a Sikh advocacy group in BC says his community remains on edge.
I think the threat is very real. With Melanie Jolie as the Minister of Foreign Affairs said about a week ago that there's still more opportunities for India to carry out assassinations of Sikh leadership in Canada.
A week ago, the RCMP went public with detailed allegations saying it had credible evidence showing 6 Indian diplomats played a role in extortion and murder of Canadian citizens in this country. Before being expelled from Canada, India's High Commissioner spoke exclusively on CTV's Question Period, where he denied any connection to the fatal shooting of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Did you have anything to do with his murder?
Nothing at all. No evidence presented, politically motivated.
Sanjay Kumar Verma added he condemns Nijjar's murder.
We should be pausing information sharing with that country.
The House of Commons held an emergency debate on alleged foreign interference by India in Canada. However, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the Liberals blocked unanimous consent on striking a special committee to look at Canada-India relations.
That's another example of the Liberals, I don't understand why, but putting up a barrier, stopping the important work of getting down to what's actually going on. How are Canadians being impacted, and what more can we do to protect Canadians?
And Moninder Singh believes that starts with our country taking a harder line with India.
India will not recognize anything but sternness, and I think that sternness has to come in the form of sanctions against India, sanctions against its diplomats.
Now, it's unclear if Canada is considering those steps. The government has already said it hopes to continue trading with India despite the diplomatic dispute. Omar?
All right, Mike, thank you. A Canadian father began another chapter in his long legal fight to hold the federal government accountable. Abdurrahman AbdulRazak is suing Ottawa for millions over his detention in Sudan. CTV's Judy Trin reports.
It took 15 years for Abdurrahman AbdulRazak to get his day in court.
Waiting so long, and finally we are here.
The Sudanese Canadian is suing the federal government for $27 million.
This is the most serious violation of human rights of a Canadian citizen ever by the Canadian government. It was over a period of 6 years where he was detained, tortured, and then exiled from Canada.
In 2009, a federal judge ordered the government to bring AbdulRazak home. 6 years earlier, the Montreal man was arrested after traveling overseas to visit his sick mother. His lawyer says Canada directed Sudan to detain AbdulRazak so they could get information to pass on to the Americans.
Sudanese authorities were telling the Canadian ambassador in Khartoum that they'd only arrested Mr. AbdulRazak because the Canadian Security Intelligence Service asked them to.
The Crown argues the government had reasonable grounds to suspect AbdulRazak as a threat and that he's the author of his own misfortune because he returned to Sudan despite warnings not to do so. AbdulRazak did know Ahmed Rassam, nicknamed the Millennium Bomber, who was caught with explosives in his car destined for the Los Angeles airport.
Oh my God!
CSIS agents also interviewed AbdulRazak on 9/11 after the Twin Towers fell. The RCMP investigated his alleged links to Al-Qaeda for 2 years. He was never charged, but became collateral damage.
I hope the justice is there for every Canadian, including me.
At this trial, diplomats and Mounties will testify. CSIS spies will be questioned behind a screen, and Lawrence Cannon, the Conservative Foreign Affairs Minister who refused to issue AbdulRazak emergency travel documents, will be called as a witness. This trial will take 8 weeks. According to documents filed in Parliament, the federal government has already spent more than $10 million fighting this case. Omar.
Judy, thank you. To a gruesome crime in Halifax. An employee with the city's police service who is not authorized to speak publicly on behalf of the force has confirmed to CTV News that a body of a teenager was found inside a large walk-in oven behind the bakery area of a Walmart store. CTV's Hafsa Arif reports.
Yellow caution tape stretches across a Walmart entrance in Halifax after a 19-year-old woman died inside the store.
On October 19th at approximately 9:30 p.m., we received a call to the Walmart at 6990 Mumford Road in Halifax for a report of a sudden death.
The woman was an employee. Police report the investigation is in its early stages.
Our investigators are working with the Nova Scotia Medical Examiner Service and Occupational Health and Safety to determine the manner and cause of death.
Forensics teams were at the store late last night. The Department of Labor told CTV News it hasn't started its investigation, but are aware of the situation and are communicating with police. Since the incident, Walmart has closed the store, with no word on when it will reopen. In a statement, it says, "We are heartbroken, and our deepest thoughts are with the associate and their family. We extend our sincerest condolences to those who were closest to them." Police say they're aware of the speculation being made in the community, but will not confirm or address the information being shared.
We just ask the public, once again, for their patience throughout our investigation, and we ask that people be mindful that of the family members involved and the co-workers.
While the identity of the woman has not been released, the Maritime Sikh Society confirms the woman was a member of their community who moved to Nova Scotia 2 or 3 years ago. Walmart says it's supporting its employees and is offering counseling. Hafsa Arif, CTV News, Halifax.
Overseas, a jarring interruption during Charles's first visit to Australia since becoming king in 2022. An Indigenous senator heckled the monarch. CTV's Adrian Gobriel on the confrontation.
A welcome by Indigenous musicians in Australia's capital turned from a reception to a condemnation of King Charles and the monarchy.
Give us our land back! Give us what you stole from us!
The woman screaming at the king. Indigenous Australian Senator Lydia Thorpe.
This was an extraordinary moment in the Australian Parliament by a parliamentarian to interrupt that ceremony.
Just moments before the protest began, Charles acknowledged Australia's Indigenous history.
And all First Nations peoples who have loved and cared for this continent for 65,000 years.
Last year, a referendum on giving greater political rights and recognition to Indigenous people was rejected in Australia. The country has never established a treaty with its Indigenous peoples.
We are the real sovereigns.
Senator Thorpe is among those who've been advocating for a treaty and the abolishment of the monarchy.
Never will be my king.
We don't need a king from another country to dictate to us what we do here.
From Australia to Canada, the monarch's treatment of Indigenous peoples has a controversial past. During Charles' last visit to Canada as Prince in the spring of 2022, Indigenous leaders asked the Crown for an apology over the assimilation and genocide of First Nation communities. While the two shared pleasantries, even Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has shared his desire for his country to become a republic with an Australian head of state.
You are seeing two sides of Australia, an Australia that does seem to have some deep-seated issues when it comes to the royal family and having the British monarch as head of state.
Charles made no reference of the incident following the ceremony. While some protesters were in attendance outside, hundreds also lined the streets today, including an alpaca, to greet the King and Queen. This is Charles' first trip to Australia since becoming king, and it's the first visit by a reigning British monarch since the late Queen traveled there in 2011. Omar.
All right, Adrian, thank you. Coming up, female soccer players calling out the ugly politics behind the beautiful game.
Tomorrow, it says charity on the bin. Where do you hope it goes?
To people that need it.
We uncover what really happens to the clothes you give away.
The charity side of this is very small.
W5 investigates tomorrow on CTV National News and ctvnews.ca.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has appointed former federal health minister Dr. Jane Philpott to head a new team tasked with connecting everyone in the province with primary health care within the next 5 years.
We are going to need to add some additional resources to the teams that already exist, and we're going to need to add some new primary care teams in Ontario, and we will keep going until every single person has access to care close to home.
More than 2.5 million Ontarians don't have access to a family doctor. More than 100 professional women's soccer players are urging the sport's governing body to end its partnership with the Saudi oil giant, pushing FIFA to put people over finances. CTV's Garrett Barry explains.
Canadian captain Jesse Fleming and former longtime goaltender Aaron McLeod are two of the players who signed their name to the letter released today. They say Saudi Arabian money and state-run megacorporation Aramco should be kept far away from the game. In today's letter, they point to imprisonments of feminist activists, censorship, and a prohibition against gay marriage and partnerships. Writing, imagine LGBTQ plus players, many of whom are heroes of our sport, being expected to promote Saudi Aramco during the 2027 World Cup, the national oil company of a regime that criminalizes the relationships that they are in and the values that they stand for. The group also says global warming and climate change is making soccer more expensive and harder to reach around the world. They wrote FIFA might as well pour oil on the pitch and set it alight. It's not the first time that women's soccer stars have spoken out. A Saudi tourism company was set to sponsor the 2023 World Cup until major backlash. But this deal with Aramco was already a few months old, gives the company sponsorship of the 2026 World Cup, co-hosted by Canada, and the 2027 Women's Tournament.
FIFA has had to continuously fight back against and say, actually, well, this aligns with our values. Now, it's pretty hard to bring out that argument this time around because, I mean, this is a clear violation of a lot of the values that FIFA highlight.
It's a concept called sports washing. Critics allege regimes like Saudi Arabia use their money to buy good press through sports sponsorships. Professor Steve Chen at Moorhead State University had studied that phenomenon. He said groups like FIFA could use some leverage to try to get concessions from big companies before taking their money.
There's something no doubt we can help to move the needle instead of just let them using sports and money as a way to wash their political crime or the scandals.
For its part, FIFA says it values its partnerships and the money from Aramco gets reinvested back into the game. Omar?
All right, Garrett, thanks. Still ahead, an off-duty lifeguard saves a missing teen. Cuba has restored electricity to most of its capital today as Tropical Storm Oscar continues dumping heavy rain across the island's east. Other parts of Cuba are still without power. Oscar made landfall late last night as a Category 1 hurricane, then was downgraded, triggering landslides and winds up to 120 kilometers an hour. An airport in New Zealand is causing quite a stir for an interesting new rule to keep traffic moving. Take a look at this sign that reads max hug time 3 minutes in the drop-off zone. It goes on to say, fonder farewells, please use the car park. It's received a lot of reaction online, with one person calling it inhumane. And a grateful teenager is recovering after a dramatic ocean rescue off the coast of Hawaii. The 17-year-old boy spent nearly 12 hours in the water when his kayak capsized.
As I started drifting away, it just got darker and darker, and I kind of just, I freaked out for maybe a couple of minutes.
A local off-duty lifeguard and family friend borrowed a boat and, with some direction from the U.S. Coast Guard, found the teen clinging to his kayak.
That was priceless. So it's an incredible feeling making the call to the parents. It was really emotional seeing that he's alive and on my boat.
The teen was treated for hypothermia and released from hospital. Great to see. After the break, trying to bounce into the history books. Trampolines have grown by leaps and bounds since first being invented in the 30s, and now a Saskatchewan company is trying to break a record. Here's CTV's Alison Bamford.
This isn't your typical backyard trampoline.
This thing's a powerhouse.
At 30.5 meters long, the Regina-based company believes it's the world's second longest trampoline, just a prototype for what's to come.
This is going to be a 200-foot trampoline, but it also performs like a professional trampoline.
Russia holds the current world record for longest trampoline, a gargantuan design stretching 51 meters through a forest, built as a road alternative and art installation in 2012. The Saskatchewan trampoline, once constructed, will be freestanding at nearly 61 meters long.
There were a lot of different modifications as we kept making the trampoline longer and longer and longer for it to still perform well, still bounce, and still be sturdy.
Like all trampolines they manufacture, computers generate the design. This machine marks and cuts the material before it's sewn together, all done in shop, a process that's evolved in the province over the decades.
They started in the 1970s in Herbert, Saskatchewan, actually hand-making trampolines, and it was farmers looking for something to do in the winter and keeping their families having fun.
Personal use has turned professional in the trampoline business. The company has expanded to gymnastics and extreme sports, but still needs a partner who has big plans for such a big idea.
It gives us this ability to kind of grow from just, you just make a trampoline for someone's backyard, to actually building high-end training facilities for niche and specific skills.
Skills that the company wants to see performed on the record-breaking design as soon as possible. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
And that's a snapshot of this Monday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.